quite tough to start a school, right? Because there's the paperwork involved, the licenses that need.
How do you become a kind and good person? And we have a virtues program that's still related to the church.
You guys run social media ads.
Use ChatGPT for everything or some of the other things, but
One of the tools which have come across which allows you to do that is through artificial intelligence. Welcome to the podcast. For any independent school, enrollment is the engine that drives everything. It's the lifeblood. But in today's competitive and changing landscape, attracting and retaining families is as challenging as ever. Today, we are deconstructing the playbook of success with a leader from one of the most competitive markets in the country. We are joined by Dr. Tim Spurrier, head of school at Barnhart School in Arcadia, California. Dr. Spurrier, thank you for being here.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
We would love to start to understand from your journey itself. How did you end up here?
Yeah. I'd have to say, like, I wasn't one of those, kids that, wanted to be in education or wanted to be into teaching. I really loved athletics. I was more into, being a very active, hands-on kind of person. But I always had a little bit of, just really always loved the idea of studying people, studying learning, trying to figure out like how people tick, what makes people motivated. And as I began to get more and more into into education, I began to really start seeing, you know what? The brain is related to learning. I know as simple as that sounds, for so long, I think it was like a foreign concept in education. It's like we learn because of the function of our brain, and so I began to kind of study that a little bit more. And then, as far as independent education, I kind of did a mid-career, well, I shouldn't say mid-career, I was still my early 30s. I decided I really wanted to teach at in elementary school and early childhood. And, I wanted to make an impact. And so that's where I started to kind of get into education, kind of evolving to a point where, I thought that what would be a great way to be able to have a better impact than to start my own school. And so, with no knowledge of anything at that point other than how to write a curriculum, I started a school in Hawaii. It was a small independent school. And kind of went from there. And then since then have been head of school at I think five different places, and sometimes interim and sometimes as a full-time head of school.
I always, whenever we start something, it's a challenge, and
Mhm.
and it's quite tough to start a school, right? Because the paperwork involved, the licenses that you need to take place, plus you have all the students' lives that are on you, and even the teachers and the staff. So how was
Mhm.
that experience?
Yeah, I'd have to say that was it was life-changing in so many ways, in that I was not I was not a real business person. I didn't really understand business. I didn't really understand marketing. I didn't really understand those type of things. I knew curriculum. I knew how to educate. Like I said, I'm fascinated by the brain. I'm fascinated by what motivates people. And so it was a very big change to be the daily person that has to make decisions and has to be able to lead people and be able to put out into the community, here's an idea. Um, but it's like any startup. I had an idea, had a concept, had a kind of a vision of where I wanted to go with it, and then found that people shared that and they wanted to be part of it. And we were very small, but we started. I think maybe our first semester, we had 16 kids, and I found somebody who was very like-minded in teaching. And by December, we had 45 kids. And
Wow.
so it began to kind of grow because people saw what we were trying to do. And at the time, like we were very innovative. Now it would be very mainstream, but, but at the time we were very innovative and, trying to individualize education for kids and not necessarily always starting from where we're at, but starting from where they are. It was something that was just a little different. But, I went through all the same things that most people do in startups. I didn't pay myself for 2 years. I was trying to do like odd jobs on the weekends. I did real estate. I did whatever I had to do to keep us going. And I just really like reached out to the business community and said, like, help me with this. Like, I want to be somebody who's knowledgeable in business. And later on, I began to say, oh, okay, now I'm going to enroll in these different classes and these different courses, and I'm going to try to learn more about business and marketing. But it took a little bit of time. But yeah, so I'm still happy to say the school is still running since 1996. I'm no longer really actively involved with it, but they still use the same curriculum, same theories, and that same knowing the kids and loving the kids that we started with back in that time period.
And I guess that experience kind of leads to the whole enrollment, right? Because I think enrollment is
Mhm.
the biggest question that is there. Because in the zip code radius, you have charter, public, Catholic, independent. So how does someone comes and perceives value from you guys? Or like what does parents think about it?
Yeah, yeah. So, and this is enormously competitive with a really shrinking market. When I say that too, with we in Arcadia, we are in a smaller area, and then Pasadena is next to us. There's an independent school, probably, and everybody, it feels like every block, there's an
Yeah.
independent school. And and then the public school system is really strong. The charter school system is really strong, and so there is a lot of competition. I think when people look at us, they kind of say, "Okay, here's a school where our children are really going to be where we appreciate their uniqueness." We don't look at them as being, "Okay, here's our standard, you know child." This is like every child is totally unique, and if we approach our classes and our education in a way where we don't appreciate that or try to, tailor that around that, we're not going to be in business as an independent school. We have to be able to do that. And the school was founded on that 65 years ago, but it was founded on that individualization, on unique children who have contributions and inclusivity, those kind of things. That was something from the very beginning. It just, as everything goes, COVID wiped out a lot of small schools, and the school was struggling with that too. But I think in this area, that would probably be the biggest dilemma is that there's a lot of independent schools, a lot of small schools, a lot of big schools, and there's the school system is good here. I mean, there's for a public school, the public school system is good. So there's a lot of competition, and we just really have to reach out to parents and say, what we really value is your child as an individual. We have the smaller class sizes, but that's not enough. We have teachers who really tailor the education, and we look at the social and emotional and really say, we want to develop ethical, strong, kind leaders. So that's where we're really at, and I think that's what the value that we add, to this community.
And that because when you guys started out, I think you guys were also related to a church,
Mhm.
but you accept all faiths. And how does that translate? Because I know I'm in San Francisco and I understand that there are folks who are very closely tied to their churches and they're closely tied to a particular building, right? Like, and then they're like, I'm going to go to this Catholic school and that's it. But
Right.
you guys do a nice balance of being tied to one, but yet quite open and perceptive about everything. So how does
Yeah.
that work?
Yeah, and I think from the very beginning, again, the reason why we're called Barnhart School is because a woman named Ethel Barnhart started the school and the church, and she started the school first because she really felt that education was so vital for the community, and it really thrived for so many years in that environment of inclusivity and making sure that if you're whatever your belief, this is a home for you. And if you would like to go and be members of the church, that's available also. But even there, I think that they really emphasize virtues, emphasize how do you become a kind and good person. And we have a virtues program that's still related to the church. Uh, that really that's what we're looking at. Any religion, matter of fact, any person really values those. So it doesn't really have to be like one religion or another. This is one where you really can come in and you can see like inclusivity, and you can see kindness, how you're treating your neighbor, listening. There's all part of those virtues that we maintain here as part of our program. And so I think it really is. It's like you can be any faith, no faith, whatever, I think you can come here and you would feel very comfortable.
So for sending this message out, because I know your background from communication and marketing and understanding the
Mhm.
brain, how do you have a marketing person who does social media? Do you guys run social media ads? Do you guys do print? Or how do you spread this message across?
Yeah. So, the number one, really the number one way that you can market a school is through relationships and building relationships. So that's within the community itself. I really ask my teachers, I ask myself, I ask parents, get out into the community, wear a shirt, make people ask about us. But not only that, but be really visible as much as you can. I'm I'm fine speaking one-on-one. I don't particularly like speaking in front of a whole lot of group of people. I'm not great when I go into like social settings where I'm having to, mingle and be able to just, conversation, that kind of thing. But I found how effective that is. And I have something that I really believe in. And so it's easy then to go to things like the Chamber of Commerce, Rotary clubs. There's a Friday night fair in a little town near us here. We go and we have a booth and we just talk to people, talk to them about education, talk to them about some of the things that we can offer. Those are the type of things. We also have a marketing person, so we do social media as much as possible. When I'm invited on a podcast, I go, those kind of things. But also, probably a little less in the print media at the moment, but it really is getting that word out. And our best ambassadors are our kids and our parents. So, we want that good word about what we're doing kind of going out with them. And if they're feeling comfortable with the relationship they have with their teachers, with the kids, with me as a head of school, I meet with each of them. I make sure that I meet with every parent. I have a conversation. I want to know their goals for their kids. I want to see their vision for what they would like their children to do. And then on the other hand, then too, we can start kind of shaping like how do we get to that point where we can help your child get to accomplish what you all see as being the vision of where you want to go with your child.
So essentially looking at the children's outcomes and what parents are expecting the children to be, do you keep changing the curriculum according to that need too? And tailor it to what the kids are looking for right now?
I think a bit, like I know that there's extremes, you know,
For
um,
sure.
and I think what we need to do is be a little more realistic about things. Kids who have incredible ideas of what they want to do, in the future, and they may be, I've always dealt with a lot with the neurodivergent community, and when you're dealing with it, you have amazing people who are coming up with amazing things, but you also have people who have never been given the opportunity to express themselves, and that's the opposite end of giftedness, right? It's like you can have these gifted kids, you can have prodigies, and you rarely hear about them after they're a prodigy when they're younger. So here, what we would do is we would like to say, okay, here's the foundation of the education. You need still to have that foundation. And then where do you take it from there? And how do we get you to be able to succeed the best that you can succeed in there? Being like the best self, that kind of thing. How do we get you there? And so our teachers really try to think, okay, if a child has an extreme interest in something, how do I relate that with Greek history or whatever it is, and then try to
Yeah.
incorporate that within. It's been something I've been dedicated to my all through education. Even as a kid, I was like, well, why am I bored? It's
Yeah.
like, you know, and so I've always kind of thought, okay, how do we make it so that there's have tos and want tos, and sometimes you have to do things, and sometimes that teacher is trying to figure out, okay, how do we get them to do the want to and still kind of relate it to where we're at?
One of the tools which have come across which allows you to do that is through artificial intelligence, right? Like
Mhm.
different tools which allows you to make a lesson plan according to each kid's needs. You could,
Yes.
are you guys using it? What's your view on the whole thing?
Yeah. So, I definitely, I think anybody who's saying that we're not going to have, AI in schools is really making a huge mistake. I think over reliance on it is also a mistake. So
Yeah.
we have to try to figure out like how do we blend those things together. And people in the ed tech, right? I mean, that's like I look for those answers there too, and then like to give input sometimes and say, okay, I understand. I understand that we now have tools that can individualize better, but you still have to have that relationship with that person, and AI doesn't understand that relationship yet, and
Yeah.
so I don't know that they will, but I mean, how do we use that? But I mean, there's certain tools that we've been using already, and when kids get home and the math fight that
Yeah.
kids have with their parents, it's like, well, you have to do your math homework. Well, didn't you learn this today? And it's like, yeah, but I don't remember. Now we have some AI devices where the kid can ask, okay, can you help me come up with not the method for the problem? And we've really started to use that a little bit more, and then just even in depth now, sometimes like I don't think it's something that we should bar. I think it's something we should use. I mean, I would like kids to actually write, but and not necessarily use ChatGPT for everything or some of the other things. But I definitely think we need to continue to incorporate it, into what we're doing and not be. I think it's the same like as when cell phones came out, right? And there were people who said we got to bar the cell phone, that kind of thing. Well, I think they did the same with the iPad and the other things, right? It's like we have to bar those, and now it's incorporating what we do. But we also see the drawback, too much dependence.
Exactly.
So, so it's somehow or another, I know we'll find a balance sometime, with this, but at the moment, I think it's just, trying to figure it all out.
I absolutely get that because I don't think so. There's one balance to it at all. Like
Right.
because even with cell phones, right, like or social media or even internet before that, you would always think that there's a balance and then there's too much of it and then there's, hey, let's just about it.
Right.
Somewhere in the middle is how you have to go. I think it's a conversation. And one of the things that we like as I and my team we relate with is having human skills and having a conversation about those talked about more and more. And that's to
Mhm.
your point, right? Like AI does not do emotions, it doesn't do social emotional learning, it doesn't do
Right.
problem solving or critical thinking. It does do problem solving, but like critical
Right.
thinking, what questions to ask, how do you get to that point using the gray matter?
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that that's where that we really need to be, working on. It's easy to get an answer if you want a direct answer, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
It saves time, but now analyze that answer. Let's work more on like the data, the statistics for kids. How are they going to problem solve. If they have that background in kind of a quicker way to be able to get some of that background, then they can go a little bit deeper into it and they can start solving problems. They can start doing things that are a little bit more complex.
Again, I'm going to take this and I'm going to come back to enrollments. One of the things
Okay.
which we dis ended up discussing was word of mouth, right? Like spreading word of mouth. And I've noticed some people have, if you bring a sibling in, there's going to be a discount for the
Right.
tuition fee or something like siblings discount or cousins coming in. So you kind of create that word of mouth automatically.
Mhm.
So do you guys do that also?
Yeah, we don't necessarily do a sibling discount, but we do have a lot of families that come through, and ones that I think even though the children may be completely again unique. I
Hmm.
think that's what the parents like about it is that my 5-year-old is completely different from my 8-year-old. They think completely different. And I have this conversation all the time with them, and that's part of I think the marketing part of it and part of the selling point for us at the school is that you know anybody who's married knows that their husband and wife think differently. You
Absolutely.
know, their kids think differently. So why would we expect the exact same education for those people, And so the same thing, I really believe that getting that kind of out there that, that we need to be able to adjust to what we're doing, that word of mouth gets out more. And then the siblings come. We have had some though that where the parents say, "Hey, this is a great school for this child, but we think another school might be better for the other." And we're cool with that too. It's like if you feel that that's the better fit for your child, then that's where they need to go. But I've also found that when we do that, the parents are very happy that we're supportive of their children. We're not saying, oh, if your older one comes, your younger one has to come. We'll give you a discount. We'll sell you on the way to get them in here, that kind of thing. But, no, we keep the same, but at our school, we've done too, is we've really looked to see how do we reach out to different communities that have been underserved in independent schools. We're not 100% successful yet, but we've only been doing it for 3 years. So it's like, how do we reach out to make sure that the education is affordable, but also, again, giving kids a unique opportunity to be, here with us. We're really trying to make sure that we're not just looking at here's our set tuition, this is what you have to pay to be part of it. We'll make that. I don't like to use the sliding scales term, but it sort of is.
Yeah.
People can put in for financial assistance, and we do a really good job of trying to make sure that we're meeting their needs.
And I would want to touch on this topic more because I wish more independent school would take that stance
Mhm.
of providing that financial assistance or even looking at from a scholarship viewpoint, if we have to say that. So, what does a parent have to do to apply for that scholarship? How do you look at from a student perspective? Everyone applies, everyone gets it, or are there some markers to the same?
Yeah, and I do think that we've used some criteria, but we really have also made it very very open. We've done some scholarships that would be more aimed at, again, underserved communities, and we've also done some that hey, we've got kids that have enormous academic potential, or we have some that are struggling with their academics, and their families are like, we would love to be there, but we can't afford it. So, we do the normal financial assistance type of process, and then we get the recommendations of what they can afford and what they can't. If we make sure that it happens for them. So I don't ever want a child to be able to not come to our school because their parents feel it's such a burden on them that they can't afford it. I wish more schools, you're exactly what would do that. But again, I'll kind of go back a little bit to the relationship type of thing. In the past, and a lot of times schools that are larger schools that have the wait list of 7 children per, one spot, it's transactional. And,
Yeah,
it's a transaction. Well, you're going to pay that amount. Not that a lot of the schools don't give scholarship. They do, but the basis is you're going to pay this amount of money to go to school, and it's a transaction between you and the school itself. Where here we want to make sure that, again, it's relationship oriented. If somebody comes in, we had the fires here not long ago. That was only
yeah,
5 miles away from here. And, people would come to us and they would say, our house burnt. How am I going to make payments here? And so many have tried. But we were like, okay, let's work with this. We know that, we already know your child. We love your child. We want them here. So, we love your family. So please, like, we'll work it out with you, and we did, we had a lot of success and, by doing that, just over the last 3 years, we've had an increase of 60% at our school of enrollment. 3-year cumulative, it's 60%. We're still a very small school, and we know that we would like to continue to grow, but I think a lot of that has just been, again, getting that word out that this is a place where we value you, and hopefully parents kind of come with that same attitude towards us.
yeah. 60% growth is unheard of, specifically in this season, right? Because
Yeah.
so competitive and the space you are in and the place you are in, it's not like they aren't, as you mentioned, Pasadena, it's like
Right.
not that far away and there's so many
Right.
different options out there. So,
Yeah.
and I'm also guessing that you're applying for grants and you're applying for different ways to cover this. Why not? And this is another question, and there must be multiple answers to it. Why not go the charter route where you can take some money from the district itself?
Yeah, I think, I've actually, like, I've done a lot of studying on charters because when they first came out, I really thought that was the way to go. Um, you know, and I can't really speak much about California, but some of the other states that I've been in, it's been very money driven, and let's get the 25 kids in the seats. Not all of them are meant to be that way, but but I really find that they become very money driven. Not that independent schools aren't. We're kind of similar in that way. But then, the amount of restrictions, even when you're charter, you still are stuck with, a good amount of restrictions. Where here, like you know, we really can do a lot of different things. Now, independent schools often don't because the market doesn't dictate it to them, right? The market wants
The norm.
independent schools to look a certain way. They want them, and so, they don't always do that. In a small school, you have that flexibility sometimes, where you can make a difference. You can say, okay, you know what, we have 10% of our kids in this classroom have already been assessed as gifted. We have a few kids that are on the autism spectrum. We have some kids in here that have ADHD, everything, we have your atypical or your typical kids, your atypical kids, and you can combine it together and make the education, you bring that community together. I think you can do that in small independent schools and then serve all those children. I think sometimes when it gets a little bit larger, you start having difficulties. Um, that was a long way around to saying I think charters are incredible, but I think there's also some difficulties with it there too. And I was previously in Hawaii, and we couldn't find space was our biggest problem. I was working with a group who was trying to start a charter school and could not find space that we could afford, and we found like what we wanted to do was a small dual language school. And we found that we would have to have at least 300 to 400 children in that small school to be able to make it like a break even point, because of the enormous costs that you would have there. A lot of independent schools, of course, have locations already, so that does help. But yeah, I'm sorry, long answer to the charter. I'm very supportive. I've just, like for me, I've just kind of seen the flexibility you can have in independent schools has been a little better suited for me.
For sure. It's just one of those things where I have spoken to a lot of California charters,
Mhm.
where I thought specifically the way that you've been describing how you guys run it here, where
Mhm.
I thought, okay, maybe if specifically for the money and the fact that a lot of students would be able to afford it because like it's the state put some money in, and like there's it's not equivalent to a public school money, but it's still
Right.
not absolutely zero, and it's there. So that's why the idea came across, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
just say it out and then see what you are at.
Yeah. Yeah. No, again, I'm incredibly supportive of it, especially. I'm supportive of the public schools too. I'm a product of public schools. I never thought that I would teach in independent schools. Never thought that I would be part of this. It kind of evolved mainly from seeing, oh, I get more flexibility. We really can address things, a little differently. So,
For sure. And I think I'm gonna end, and like one of my last questions to you is the fact that your journey has a lot of turnarounds, where you've been head of schools at four different places, and you know,
right.
just starting something and then being head at different places. So when
Mhm.
you join a new school and when you joined here, what does the first 100 day steps looks like? Which department do you assess? Which one do you change? Or do you let everything go and then see and then take a step?
Yeah, so I think in the situations that I've been in, pretty much it's been you got to take action almost right away. But also, you can't come in and bulldoze, like history, right?
Yeah.
And so, I know I overuse the word relationship, but I have to get to know the people there first. So from my first couple of weeks in any place that I go to, I try to make sure that I'm getting to know everybody on our staff. I get to meet with parents. I get to meet the community members, alumni, great, like in young alumni, not necessarily ones that were there 40 years ago because the school was different, whatever, you try to get with them. So that would be the thing. And then really taking a look, and again, at independent schools where I said that charters are very money driven, independent schools do too. So you have to start looking at like, what is your enrollment outlook? What is your financial outlook? Do you have a 5-year plan in place? And almost every place I've gone to, I've worked with either the CFO, or I've hired a CFO, or sometimes a contract, and I said, let's come up with a 5-year plan. How are we going to get to places that we want to go within this time period? I'm really happy to say that at this school, 3 years ago, we put the 5-year plan in place and we hit our enrollment number this year. Exactly what we predicted from the very beginning. Exactly. And so,
Congratulations.
yeah,
That's
so now I'm trying to
incredible.
say, yeah, I'm trying to say, let's go up. I want to move the bar a little higher, but th those would be the things that I'm really looking at. So, the first 100 days is listening a lot, doing some analysis, not jumping to conclusions too quickly. One things I've learned, and this is one thing I want to, talk, anytime that you're a head of school or a principal, you don't know what situation the other people were in before you. So it's easy to come in and criticize and take a look and say, oh, geez, why'd they make that decision? But you don't know what they were going through at that time period. You don't know what their pressures were. And so I always say, take a step back and not be judgmental. Just get the facts, take a look at those and then start analyzing and come up with your own plan. But I would say that's what, my first 100 days looks like. I look at the culture. Eventually, we try to look at what's the culture of the school? Do I have people that I want to put on, my team immediately? Who are going to be my resistors? Those kind of things and then kind of put out what the vision is during that time period.
So before we ended, one of the conversation which we normally do, and we would ask you also to provide us, is from the last podcast. We asked the previous leader to give us the next question for someone else to answer. So the
Yeah.
question that they asked was, they wanted to figure out how do you connect with parents? Because it's very easy to connect with students and teachers and build relationships. How do you build relationship with parents? What all can you do for that?
Yeah, and this is one that I've done at every school I've been at. Let's have a one-on-one coffee together. Let me get to know them. I found the most loyal parents are the ones who I meet at that time period. They're the ones that are going to be loyal to you for years and years to come. They may buy the vision when they came in. You might not have been part of that, but the when you first meet with them and you start talking about their children and about where they see them going, that's such an important thing. And having that one-on-one, it's so much, it takes up so much time, but it's so worth it because you'll find that when things get to be, as in every school, there's when there's that downward cycle and something is not going as well as you want, you'll see that those are the people who are going to step up to be able to help you and support you. So that's what I always try to say is get that first, that one-on-one meeting, block it off, even if it's a half hour, have coffee, donut, whatever you have to do, just something with them to be able to get to know those people. And then, that everybody's impressed if you know their child's name. I have a hard time, but I try, learn their name, learn that. And, I think those are the real keys.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Till. It's been a
Ah,
pleasure.
thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me on and having this chance to talk with you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information about Tomo Club, visit Tomo Club or follow us on our socials. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.